Hello, this is Zahirul. Welcome you all, and frankly speaking, my guest today is Suzanne Frindt. She is the president and CEO of the Hunger Project. Hunger Project is a global organization for ending poverty all across the world. Suzanne joined in Hunger Project May 2017. She brings years of experience working with top executives along with astute financial and fundraising skills, a deep understanding of the Hunger Project's work, having been investor and partner for the past 30 years, and a passionate commitment to the organization's mission to end hunger, of course. Suzanne holds an MBA from the University of California, Irvine. We welcome Suzanne Frindt on Frankly Speaking.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
This is the second visit to Bangladesh.
It is.
After 18 years.
It is.
How does it feel?
Well, it feels like it was way too long to wait. I never intended to have it be 18 years. But
you have been passionately involved with working and ending hunger and poverty all across the world. So
yes.
Tell us, start with your experience, how you did first start your journey to this campaign.
Okay. Well, my first connection to the Hunger Project came about 30 years ago when I first learned about the organization from my husband, Dwight, who's been involved a full 40 years. So in those days, I was an investor in the Hunger Project. Just been the CEO, as you mentioned, of the Hunger Project this last year, but 29 other years were spent as being an investor in our programs and our work around the world. Some of the things that interested me most when he first introduced me to the Hunger Project was this idea that the traditional charity creates dependency. And the Hunger Project really asserted that the empowerment model and actually having people shift their mindsets was the way that development should be done. So that was my first intriguing entrance into the Hunger Project and why I was investing over all those years.
So charity doesn't work alone.
Charity doesn't work alone. The world knows that. There are still many organizations working a bit from that paradigm. But the idea that to create a dependency of people, when you bring charity, bring something to the party that people didn't have before, which is needed in some cases, certainly humanitarian aid and some crises certainly is needed. But we work with chronic persistent hunger and poverty rather than the catalytic kind of urgent crisis needs. And in those cases, with decades and maybe generations of poverty, there's a different approach that works, which is our empowerment model.
So this model, has that been significantly changing from charity to empowerment?
I think the world has been slowly changing from charity to empowerment. When I first started investing in the Hunger Project in the late 1980s, it was not a well-accepted principle. And so as a small, strategic, catalytic organization, we really faced into that paradigm, and we're really working to insist that community-led development, having people have a voice in what the development in their own lives and gaining power over their own dignity and self-reliance was the way to really go. And to do that, we really needed to be their partners, to stand shoulder to shoulder with them and help create opportunities, possibility, something for them to step courageously into their own life.
So then, ending hunger is a big challenge. It's a gigantic job.
It is.
All across the world.
It is.
How do you see the fight, where we stand right now in the current world?
Well, first of all, when the Hunger Project talks about ending hunger, it's a different concept than many organizations that might try to alleviate hunger, to alleviate the symptoms. We're actually going for ending the condition of hunger, which means we constantly ask ourselves, what's missing? Here we are right now, what's missing and what's next? I think what's happening in the world over the last 30 years that I've been investing is the world has moved, international development and some governments have moved to seeing this empowerment model, looking at how to do development in this community-led way. So empowering the individuals and communities and creating community cohesion, social cohesion, and self-reliance.
How successful is the endeavor? I mean, including the Hunger Projects. Many global organizations have been relentlessly working for ending hunger or alleviating poverty all across the world. But how do you see the campaign? How do you see the amount or degree of attention and support?
Well, I think there's a large amount of support. Certainly things have changed a lot over the 40 years the Hunger Project has been around and the 30 years that I've been investing. I'd say that that some of the things that draw attention away from the progress that has been made in ending hunger and poverty are the types of hunger and poverty created by wars or cataclysmic sort of nature events. And so if you take those kind of issues off the table, the chronic persistent hunger and poverty has actually decreased tremendously in the last 30 years. So I would say that the sort of the war on poverty or war on hunger is being won. And the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, have played a key piece in keeping the world focused on the year 2030 to meet these objectives.
Do you think is that very meaningful instrument, or will be very productive instrument for achieving the goals and objectives set by the international leaders?
I think so. I mean, there are different governments and different countries are doing better or worse on that scale. But I think that it is something that governments and other organizations have signed on to that helps keep the focus on that. And the organizations that we partner with and the governments that we associate with definitely have their eye on the ball. And it's our intention to be a support structure for that.
You and your husband, Dwight Frindt, have been traveling extensively all across the world, all the continents. I mean, if you have a comparative lookout to the state of hunger, how do you define the state in the countries in this region?
The competitive state of the status of hunger in this region. Well, if I speak specifically about Bangladesh, I can say that the people of Bangladesh have an indomitable spirit, are just sort of relentless in a commitment for their own success. So there's something about that in a culture that when there's that, and people have told me that that's been hard earned by lots of adversity. So that sort of gives the tenacity and the stick-to-itiveness. But whatever has caused that or brought that about in the Bangladeshi culture, it actually bodes well for the resilient, uplifting of dignity, self-reliant type of empowerment work that we do.
But do you think that, indomitable spirit can
like that
only,
word, huh?
only encounter the grinding poverty and hunger? Is that enough?
Is that enough? Is the indomitable spirit enough? I think there's also lots of intelligence, creativity, innovation. In our work, when we work with people in the grassroots villages, in our vision, commitment, and action workshop, which first starts with people creating a vision for themselves and a vision for their communities, free from hunger. We hear lots of possibility, lots of dreams, lots of ideals in people in the deepest poverty. So when
is that the progress you have made is impressive to you? If you compare 18 years back.
Yes, I just think that the sheer numbers and also the speed with which we're able to now be able to generate that what I want to say, transformation in terms of the human spirit and also the communities. Because it's when people are, I just came from a celebration, a 25 years career celebration for our country director here, Badil Majumdar, who you know. And there were about 500 people in the audience, many of whom were activists and catalysts trained by the Hunger Project and unleashing the human spirit. The stories of their lives and the things that they've created for themselves are extraordinary. And I think that's the benefit of having that 18 years from when I was here in the year 2000. And when I was here in 2000, by the way, was for the launch of the National Girl Child Day, which the Hunger Project helped initiate. And I was here with my daughter, my girl child, who was 16 at the time. And I think that, the progress I've seen, just the incredible advancement, which needs to be more, it really needs to be localized, much more localized, and keep pushing towards the SDGs.
So, Suzanne, the Hunger Project in Bangladesh has been active since the mid-90s, and currently the country's one of the largest volunteer-based organizations covering all 64 districts. How do you find the Bangladesh chapter? You just mentioned about the country director's 25-year career with the Hunger Project.
Yes, well, Badil Majumdar, as our country director, has been instrumental in growing the Hunger Project in Bangladesh, along with capable staff and lots of volunteer efforts as well. We've gained quite a name for ourselves in Bangladesh around, so lots of the other NGOs partner with us and know of our organization for this community-based mobilization, and there's some really very interesting outcomes of that. Hunger and poverty is in our mission statement, and yet now our work is being recognized as being able to fight against violence and extremism, and peaceful elections.
These are all extended missions and vision?
Well, they're actually outcomes of our, our 3 pillars of our work are to start with women as key change agents, mobilize communities for self-reliant action, and have good relationships with local governments. So you could see that when those 3 things happen and communities care about each other, each person has a transformation in their own life, but they also get together as a community and care about each other, care about their community, that if there's violence in an election or any other time, why would they want to destroy their community, buildings in their community? Because they own it, they have a sense of ownership. So this very thing that helps cause the end of hunger and poverty is also sort of the magic potion for social cohesion and social resilience against violence and extremism. All sorts of things come from having communities.
In your view, what are the most effective tools to encounter violent extremism in countries like Bangladesh?
Well, the tool we use is our vision, commitment, and action workshops, our community cohesion, community mobilization efforts.
Something that whole society approach, incorporation of all the professionals in developing knowledge and awareness. Is that the only options for countering violent extremism?
Well, I don't know that it's the only option. It's the one that I've invested in for 30 years, and it's the option that has people take on their own lives in a powerful way and to care much more about their own lives and the lives of their neighbors and communities than they do about being violent or being extremists. So when people have an option to actually live a life that has dignity and self-reliance and to be able to feed their families, have their girl children and boy children go to school, when people have those kinds of opportunities, violence and extremism is a lot less attractive.
But you were mentioning about the elections, why it is so critically important.
Yes, well, one of our 3 pillars, as I mentioned, is forging great relationships with local governance. And the work we do in the Hunger Project, particularly in Bangladesh, has been a leader for all of our Hunger Project countries in how to forge those partnerships with government and be able to have political parties sit down together at the same table. And even here in Bangladesh, we've been instrumental in having diverse political parties sit down together and sign a contract for no violence, for fair, free, and safe elections. So I think that's extraordinary. I think it's groundbreaking. I'd like to see that spread to many more parts of Bangladesh.
That will ever happen in Bangladesh?
I have a lot of optimism, about based on our early
indomitable spirit of Bangladesh.
Well, that of course is always in the mix, but it's actually based on some real experience. I heard today at the 25-year celebration earlier today. I heard from several people spoke at the podium about being peace ambassadors, which is part of one of our volunteer networks. We have youth, unleashed women, peace ambassadors, and these people are actually elected officials who've committed that in their communities where the Hunger Project has worked to have free and fair, safe elections with no violence. So I think it takes political parties coming together. I mean, I would like to see that in my own country, where political parties weren't so polarized and could come together for the betterment of the people, which is what public service is really about. So yes, I have great optimism for just seeing the outcomes of our work already. And it's, we haven't worked on that for the last 30 years. It's only been the last 5 or 7 that our work has been noted to also help calm violence and extremism.
Let's get back to the poverty and hunger issue again.
Sure.
You were mentioning about the role of women in alleviating hunger and poverty.
Yes.
I mean, how effectively the women folks in Bangladesh is contributing for ending hunger or ending poverty?
Well, women are the key to change. Anytime something significant needs to happen in a family structure, women are at the heart of that. And, so ending the marginalization and subjugation
even in
of women.
countries like Bangladesh, women are the key change agents?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. They're the ones that make sure that the family is nourished and fed. When women's voices are heard in family
But these
issues,
contributions have never been taken into account effectively or...
Well, not never, but largely not. I mean, there's still a lot of work to do there. But it's, shows like this, lots of other places, public awareness of actually how that is changing. We have our Unleashed Women was one of our networks, And some of the women I heard from today on the podium really talked about how their whole family structure has changed. They now make decisions equally with their husbands about their children's lives, about their money. They have their own livelihoods, so they bring extra income into the family, raises the whole, you know, sort of economic situation of the family. Then the husbands start to get kind of proud of the family, you know, in that elevated economic state. So the children get to go to school. Some of those folks actually come out of poverty and send their children to university, which is, I mean, that's extraordinary progress in one generation.
Suzanne, we have been talking about the fight against hunger and poverty in the countries, including Bangladesh. And you also, very briefly, can you share your, right now as a president and CEO, what are the main goals and objectives you set out to achieve in the coming days?
Okay. Well, our mission in the Hunger Project, Ending Hunger and Poverty, has two key pieces to it. The first piece is pioneering women-centered grassroots strategies, and the second part is advocating for the widespread adoption of those methodologies. So since I've come on as the CEO, I've seen that we've done a really great job over the last 10, 15, 20 years and the programs on the ground with the grassroots, at the grassroots level, in demonstrating that the methodology works. So my focus, my strategic focus moving forward, is to be sure that our organization is also spending the time, energy, effort, resources to advocate for the widespread adoption, which means partnering with other non-governmental organizations, other nonprofits, governments, having other people really see that this methodology works and that this community-led development, gender-focused, women-focused, community-led development really needs to be the way development is done.
Is that same for all the countries you're working for?
It is the same. That, you know, in all the in Africa, Mexico, Peru, India are the other areas that we work, and our work shows up a bit differently in a culturally appropriate context in each of those places. But in each of those places, we've done a great job of demonstrating that those three pillars I mentioned, start with women as key change agents, mobilize communities for self-reliant action, and forge great relationships with local governance. Those three pillars are all over the world, and we've demonstrated in a variety of geographies, a variety of weather, a variety of religious structures, you know, economic, all those environments, that those three pillars and working with people in that way works. So now it's time to really have the world see that that works. And the world is seeing that. There are a number of people, a number of organizations that have come together with us in the movement for community-led development to really shape their development in that way, and also announce to the rest of the world that that's the way development should be done.
Susan, any sensitivity you find or you face or confront when you work in Bangladesh in particular?
Sensitivity that I face?
Yeah, your organization.
Organization. Well, let's see, is there anything specific to Bangladesh? Gosh, I'm sure our country director, Badil Majumdar, could give us some sensitivities there. For me, I think that there are struggles and sensitivities all over the world. You know, the intervening in hunger and poverty and using this method of community-led development, empowering women, and having people unleash the human spirit, shift their mindsets, at time to time is controversial.
And you get good degree of support from the policymakers or the government in power?
That depends on which country and which government's in power. You know, but generally speaking, when there is a government that is interested in the best for its people, which is what we hope all governments do all over the world, when we have governments of that nature, then they're supportive of our programs.
Tell us something about your role as a leadership speaker.
Oh.
Where did, I mean, in which year you started? I mean, and we know that in 2010, you and your husband co-authored a leadership development book, which titled "Accelerate High Leverage Leadership for Today's World." So, why you emphasized on this area?
Well, so the book, you're right. The book is called "Accelerate: High Leverage Leadership for Today's World." Is the subtitle of that. Our work in leadership and leadership development was largely based on our experience with the Hunger Project as investors over the last 30 years.
Okay.
So we took a very similar idea to the Hunger Project's Vision, Commitment, and Action workshop, where people create a shared vision, they create a commitment to going towards that vision together, and then they take action, self-reliant action. And through seeing that in all the countries that we visited over the years as investors, we took that idea and thought that's also what organizations need, all organizations need. What's the shared vision? What are we actually all here for? mean, what are you here in this station for?
Yeah.
What's your shared vision? And then what are your commitments? What are you committed to do? Either it's financial results, you know, what are you committed to do? And then taking self-reliant actions. So, we looked at the Hunger Project's principles and methodology, and just love the empowerment model versus the charity model. In the for-profit world, the distinction would be sort of the top-down, authoritative sort of type of business versus the collaborative type of business, which is now showing much more.
And the collaborative approach of model have been increasingly, getting popular in all over the world.
Increasingly more popular. Still, you'd be surprised how many businesses are still run by, authoritative leaders. But where, our book was showing that the leaders of the future, present and future, will really want to pull the most from the people that work from them rather than suppress them.
Okay.
So we want to pull out the brilliance.
Yeah, to pull out the brilliance. Thank you very much for identifying the, very core thoughts in the society. Pull up the brilliance.
Right.
But one last thing that I'd be interested to know something about, that you are you mentioned that you're an investor.
Yes.
You were, right now you are president and CEO.
I'm still an investor.
Still an investor.
Invest, part of my salary.
But you talk a lot about the women in business issues. I mean, how do you encourage people, especially the women folks in business?
Well, the women in business interests that I took up earlier in my career was also because I was a woman in business as well, and being exposed to the power of empowered women in business through the Hunger Project and their income-generating projects and difference it made. So when we used to coach or support women in business, I would, again, help them really create their vision as big as it could be, rather than keeping it small. And then gather, supporters, collaborators, and partners around them who really were supportive, that could help them make that happen.
What memories you will be cherishing in the years to come related to Bangladesh? What you are taking back home?
Well, I'm taking back home the high energy, this really high energy, commitment and passion of the Bangladeshi people.
Thank you very much, Suzanne.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, dear viewers. That was my conversation with Suzanne Frindt, President and CEO of the Hunger Project. And we thank you indeed for watching this show. We invite you to watch our next episode. Until then, do take care and goodbye.